States of America. Father, and one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and it's good to see so many faces who I usually just see out in the community when they're at the grocery store fixing stuff. Thank you guys all for being here today. Director Ratterman is not going to be joining us today, so our four of us. Now that we'll move on to public comment. Anybody who'd like to make public comment today about items that are not on the agenda. So if you're here to talk about salary survey or the audit, or any of those items down the road, you can hold to that item. But if you'd like to speak about anything else, you have 3 minutes. I'll let you know when you get up on 3 minutes like timer. So anybody would like to make a public comment?
Yes, sir.
All right, hang on. Is it online? Francisco, you have 3 minutes, buddy. Morning.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Want to start the public comment with a very heartfelt thank you to the staff that showed up on the February 27th meet and greet organized by Roxanne. They spent a really good 2.5 hours sharing their experiences and knowledge with the district, and a lot of the attendees commented about how well that worked out for them and how much they'd like to have those kinds of sessions continue. So I'd like to encourage the board to support the staff in their outreach to the community to help them understand the challenges we face together as a community for water and wastewater services. So that's comment number one. How much time do I have left?
We have a minute and 28 seconds.
Okay, the second part of my comment has to do with my request for the board to look at the February 17th Finance Committee report, which after a close review shows we have approximately a $2.82 million surplus, which is more than the $2.2 million that the July 26 rate increase is going to bring in. So I'd like the board to request a mark to market for the current results. I know we have an audit discussion later in the meeting, but this has to do with looking at the existing surplus and determining that it more than pays for the proposed $2.2 million rate increase that's scheduled for July. And I would respectfully request that the board pause that rate increase in the interest of the community's financial stress. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francisco. Other public comment online? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. These are items that are going to be non-controversial that I'll be able to agree on. Any for the board that'd like to?
I'll move for acceptance of the consent agenda. Second.
All right, is there any public comment on the consent agenda? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 4-0-1. All right. We'll move on to all business discussion regarding Second Amendment to the Memorandum of Understanding with Calaveras Unified School District, Jenny Lind Elementary School, Force Main Project. Kevin.
Good afternoon, directors. So here to talk about the Jenny Lind Elementary School Force Main Project. This project is going to construct 2 new lift stations in the lock antenna service area and construct a force main from the Jenny Lind Elementary School. So this replaces the on-site septic system that the Jenny Lind Elementary School currently has, as the project's 100% grant funded through the state Water Resource Control Board, the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, with Calaveras Unified School District being the project sponsor. CCWD and CUSD, we entered a MOU in 2018, and then another amendment to the MOU in 2020. The second amendment updates the agreement to define CCWD's role in construction of the project. So CCWD will provide technical review, inspections, coordination, data integration, and participate in the startup and final acceptance of the project to ensure that the infrastructure that the school is building will be accepted by the district. So all the district costs will be reimbursed by CUSD through the grant funding. So there'll be no impact to the CCWD ratepayers. The SRF funding agreement is expected to be signed soon between the CUSD and the water board. And we'll have a pre-construction meeting after that happens. So the contractor is expected to start sending in submittals this week for the project, and CCWD staff will have to review those submittals. The engineering committee reviewed this MOU previously, I think 2 meetings ago, and they recommended that we bring it to the full board for approval. So that's why we're here today, is to look for approval from the board on the MOU that's included in the board package.
For acceptance.
Is there any public comment?
Yes, sir.
Francisco?
A question about the revenues that will be generated to reimburse. How are those going to be treated?
Francisco, not a dialogue.
Okay, so in the
Let's go through the public comment, and then you can have a rebuttal. Francisco, is there anything else you'd like to ask?
Not at this time.
The public comment. Any last comments you want?
Yeah, we're going to submit reimbursements on a monthly basis to the Calaveras Unified School District. Then they'll get reimbursed from the water board, and they'll pay us.
Motions, or second?
Second.
Favor?
Aye.
Carries 401. Thank you, Kevin. We're going to use president's discretion. I'm going to change up the agenda order. We're going to move forward with compensation, because I'm afraid if a water pipe breaks in this county, nothing's going to get fixed. Everybody's here with us today, so there's no objection from the board. I can move it to change up 5A and 5. Michael?
Yeah,
You're on.
and so I'll kick it off a little bit of introduction, and then we have Mark from Evergreen here. And Becca, sorry to throw a curveball at you here in real time, but do you mind pulling up? Do you have a presentation? Oh, okay. Get it loaded up. So just in term by way of introduction, so the district, I think, has been really diligent about compensation studies. I think they're a really important practice for us to make sure that we're always evaluating our position in the labor market. So we work collaboratively with both bargaining units and make sure and bring in an expert consultant, because this is a kind of a complex task and a lot of work goes into it. We want to make sure that we're evaluating ourselves against what we consider our competitors in the labor market, and that we're always monitoring where we stand on that front. So we want to make sure that we're competitive and we're fair, but we're not, that we're not too high either. So there's a balance there that has to be struck, considering the district's constraints. So it's an important process. I'm always cautious to remind folks that it's a data point among many. It's never perfect. Comparing one water agency to another water agency is never exactly apples to apples. And so the work, the methodology of the study goes beyond just job titles. It looks at specific job duties of different classifications and compares those to classifications of our comparator agencies to make sure that we're getting the closest comparisons possible, but they're never 100%. And so it's not necessarily something that we take a comp study and then we go make decisions that are solely based on that comp study. It is one data point of many that all many different factors have to be taken into consideration when we make decisions about compensation. So an important data point, but not the only one. So Mark is here from Evergreen to present the work that we did on the compensation study. And how's that for timing? I'll turn it over to Mark.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to walk through this with you all. My name is Mark Holcomb, project manager at Evergreen Solutions. And so today, we'll have a sort of an overview of the process that we went through. I think that introduction was all spot on. We think this is an important process, it's a thorough process, but it's not the only consideration. So I'll talk to you about that as we move through the presentation today. We will go through the study goals, which is sort of, what was our engagement intended to do, the internal and external review. So a summary of what did we find when we looked at your data, when we looked at the market data as well. We'll talk about recommendations and next steps, and then certainly be happy to address any questions as well. So with the study goals, there's really a couple main things that we like to keep in mind. And really this reflects back to the statement just made. These are important data points, but not the only ones. The internal equity of a system is very important. It's how positions relate to one another within your organization. So internal equity, even without looking at the market, you might have a certain hierarchy you expect for positions to sit in. You might expect if a position has more complexity or more leadership or is working at otherwise at sort of quote unquote a higher level, you might expect to see that reflected in your compensation system or in your titles or anything else. On the other hand, if you see two different people who are working at the same level, you might expect to see again that their compensation is similar. Not that they necessarily have the same take-home pay. Maybe one's been here longer, maybe another has a certification or experience, et cetera. But you want to make sure they have the same compensation available to them. That's what the internal equity review is about. Project. The external review is about making those same comparisons, but instead of comparing two positions within your organization, it's comparing your organization to others. So again, we want to make sure that when we make a comparison, we are going beyond just the title. We're looking at the actual duties and responsibilities of the position. That is done by looking at the job descriptions of those peer organizations to make sure that we are matching apples to apples. And so with those internal and external pieces pulled together, we are able to make recommendations. Again, they are just recommendations on our side of different ways that you could essentially enact your compensation philosophy. So your organization does get to dictate, we'd like to pay at this percentage of the market. We'd like to pay above market or below market. Again, you'd want to make that decision and sort of say, hey, here's where we would like to position ourselves. And then this compensation study is a great tool to help you do that. With the internal review, so there's some statistics or some sort of overall summary information about your system. You'll see we looked at two different bargaining units, and you've got the SEIU and MCU with different pay ranges that we looked at, as well as the step plans that you all have in place. So the 5 steps for the one, the 9 for the other. We did look at 54 different classifications representing 74 different employees. And then the average spreads of those different ranges are between 20 and 30%, which again, you'll see some variation in the market. But again, those percentages are within the realm that we typically would see making comparisons to other organizations and our other studies. You do have about 30% of people who are paid either at or above the maximum. So with the external review, again, this is looking out at the market, just some sort of setting some of the goals for the market review, not talking about results yet, but just some of those goals for the market. We do want to check competitive compensation, again, making sure that you understand where you sit versus your market peers. We want to address any disparities or inconsistencies. So not every position is going to return the exact same data. It's not that we're going to find, hey, every single position is exactly this percentage above or below. So we want to look into those. Any areas where we see you might be paying a little better or a little worse versus the market. And then we also looked at benefits. So we'll have a little bit of a summary of the benefits comparison here as well, because it's not just about compensation. We know some people are going to value compensation more, some value benefits very highly, but we did want to take a look at the overall package. Cost of living also factors in, again, as you'll see when we look at the peer list. Obviously, not everybody is living in the same areas, is located in the same place. And so cost of living is important to understand. How does that impact things? You might have somebody who makes a slightly higher salary, but if their cost of living outstrips that salary they make, they're actually not paying very well for their area. Alternatively, again, you may have somebody who has a relatively, I'll use the word relatively out here. We know everybody's got high cost of living, but if they are a little bit cheaper to live in an area, again, we don't want to let those salaries inflate or deflate your ranges in an inequitable way. I will mention now, so this is something that will come up and review when we get to the end here, but of the peers that we looked at, we did remove the high and the low sort of outlier pair there. So that is the East Bay MUD, and then Angels Camp City as well. So we did remove those. That's the high and the low again. So just to take out the outliers on either end there. So when you see those results, you'll see that. With the external review, again, just understanding the market that we're in. Obviously, these conversations that I've had to have and kind of go around, they're a lot different since 2020 and since 2021. Department of Labor data, just looking across the country, is showing things are calming down a little bit. I mean, they're not quite what they were in 2022, 2023. But you are still seeing wages increase. Again, overall, you're seeing wages increasing by a little more than 3% across the country. And so, again, just setting that background of understanding where are we coming from. Inflation has calmed down a little bit. I mean, it's obviously lower than it was a few years ago, but recognizing, again, inflation is a compounding factor. So if it increases by a certain percent 3, 4, 5 years ago, that's the sort of context that we're coming into this with. Again, here's just a chart that sort of shows what I just mentioned, so I won't spend long on this. But again, that little gray bar there showing how high up inflation did get and then dip back down below. You'll notice the wages in that blue and that line sort of sitting the best fit for the wages. Again, understanding the wages trailed inflation for a while. They have caught up. They are a little bit above that, but you'll see at the very end of that sort of dipping off a little. Again, is the market that we're looking at right here. So these are the market organizations that we compared to. I don't know if we could read all those from here, but again, just showing that's who we got responses from. I think the next slide as well summarizes that. So if we'll skip on, you'll see here's the summary data for these peers. We did get responses from all 13 different organizations. We did include, again, all your positions in those MOUs that we looked at. And then we had about 7 positions, didn't quite get enough data to utilize. We do like to set our benchmark at 5 matches to make sure we can make a comparison to the market without letting an outlier significantly influence that data. So that does come directly from the guidelines from the federal government, dating back all the way to the Sherman Antitrust Act. Is we don't want to make comparisons and sort of collude in a market with 2 or 3 people or 2 or 3 peers to set wages there. So that was something that we were definitely aware of in the study. So again, here's your peer listing. Again, you can see at the very top and the very bottom, the peers that we, sort of looked at as the outliers there. But you can see you all do sit towards the bottom, half of that market result there. This does just order it, again, as compared to your classifications. So this is not necessarily a 100% strict comparison there. If you see 2 peers, one slightly above or slightly below, that doesn't mean that's the comparison they have with each other. Because it does sort of run everything through your organization. What you will notice is there is a pretty competitive bunch there right around you. 1 6% below, and then 2%, 2%, 3%. A couple at 7. So again, indicating even though y'all are have fallen slightly below sort of that midpoint of the market, it's not far behind some of your peers. At the very top, the very bottom, there's a little bit more spread there. But just want to sort of again help understand the picture of where you all are fitting into the market right now. So here again is to put some additional numbers to it. If you look at the numbers, again, depending on how you frame the data, obviously you can look at all peers, you can look at without that high and that low outlier there. Either way, you all have fallen a little below that market average. So again, about 5 to 6%. Again, not the lowest paying peer, you're sort of right in that bunch of that group in the middle there, but again, have fallen below that market average position. And so again, it's good to take that sort of take a look at things with a compensation study and sort of set our equilibrium again, understand where we are. It is important to note these are your overall average findings. So some positions are going to do a little better, and some positions are going to do a little worse than this. So it's not that every position, as we mentioned at the beginning, they're not all equal. Some positions are in a better position than this, but again, some are below as well. Got a couple slides here again, just to sort of publish and show y'all some of those market rates that come out there. So again, I won't spend a ton of time on this here in the presentation today. This is in the report that y'all can see. I think it's the next 2 slides. You can kind of go through those. But again, we are displaying sort of those market results for you, so y'all can take a look at that and see. And then again, to go over the benefits summary results here as well. Y'all did have some areas where you came in ahead, had some advantages, and then had some where you're trailing slightly as well. So your core benefits offerings were actually pretty generous, either at the market or maybe slightly above. So again, looking at things like healthcare, dental, vision, paid time off, retirement. I mean, those are typically when we talk about benefits. I think health, time off, and retirement are kind of the three that are certainly the highest value, and I think most employees would value the most. So you were in a good position there. Again, either at the market or even slightly more generous. I don't think anything was out of the range of the market, but again, a little bit more generous. You did have some disadvantages as well, though. So again, tuition reimbursement, and then some of the other fringe benefits like that. So the more supplemental things, there are some peers doing some creative things with benefits nowadays. I mean, it's something that people do strive to potentially recruit or attract a certain type of employee or to retain the employees they have. So overall, again, our major finding here is your benefits package is competitive. To pair that with, again, the salaries that are slightly below, your benefits are slightly above. That doesn't necessarily, again, even out for everybody. Some people would say, again, we care a lot more about salaries, or some would care more about benefits. But the overall finding would be pretty competitive. So key considerations, these are things just to understand and just to be aware of kind of as we move forward into the recommendations. So that first bullet there, I know this is a question we get a lot, and people say, well, hey, if I'm above market, am I going to get, recommended for a decrease or lose money, whatever? We don't recommend that. That's not what we're here to do. So again, just want to make sure everybody understands we're going to give you competitive recommendations to sort of put people in the spot that they should be. But again, that wouldn't include lowering or decreasing any salaries. When we look to implement, again, any recommendations, there are a number of factors that we consider. Again, one of the things that I mentioned is you all, the board of director guidance, you all have to sort of lay out where do we want to compete versus the market. Because our recommendations would change if you said, hey, we want to be a top number, number one, number two, number three in the market. That's obviously a pretty aggressive jump there. We say, hey, we want to be at the market average. We want to be slightly above. Again, there's a different set of recommendations. And then some organizations, frankly, say, look, we may not have the resources to be at that market average. We want to trail as close as we can, get in a competitive position, but maybe can't be as aggressive as we'd like to be. So depending on the guidance and the compensation philosophy is what we call that, of where you all would like to compete, those recommendations can come out slightly differently. But again, we did make some recommendations to get y'all to that average competitive position for your bargaining, for your internal equity, and then again, how you all would like to position yourselves. Employees, there are some different things to consider as well, when you put a pay structure together. It's not just what is the pay of the position, but again, how are employees positioned within that? So there's different ways you can look at that as well. With a step structure, it does make it a little bit more straightforward, which is nice. Can have consistent application of those steps, which is good. And then lastly, looking at benefits as well as staffing to make sure you have a competitive total offering. We do hear again from some employees of, hey, if this benefit's not there, it doesn't matter what the pay is because my family needs this. Staffing, likewise, if your staffing levels aren't where they should be, people might feel overworked. You might have some additional stresses and burdens there. So just wanting to mention those considerations that we know compensation is one piece of the puzzle, but it's not the be all end. So with the recommendations then, number one would be adopting an updated structure, just making sure that you are competitive with the market, moving to that desired compensation philosophy. Again, we are happy to assist and can help model any approaches that you'd like to see. But we do recommend you at least take some steps to make sure you hit that competitive market position that you'd like to have. With that, our recommendation would be to reassign specific individual jobs as needed. So again, there are some jobs that, again, fared worse than others, and some were a little more competitive. So what that means is we would not necessarily recommend just saying, hey, let's give everybody a 5%, which might move the whole structure. That's great. If you're only 2% behind market, you feel great. You're in a competitive spot. But if your position was 15 or 20% behind, you were one of the ones that's trailing in. That 5% might not make as big of a difference for you and may still leave you at a competitive disadvantage. So that is our recommendation, to look individually as you move through. Again, we've talked about financial, compensation philosophy and your financial needs. And then lastly, making sure you assign employees to that scale as well. There are a few different approaches that you can take. Some approaches, again, are consistent. Just say, hey, basically, if you're on step 2, you stay on step 2. You kind of move with the structure. Other systems are basically, hey, let's put you to the next closest step. So you might be on step 4 today, but if we move your scale up by 10%, maybe you're on step 3 tomorrow. You're still making more. You're at a higher progression. Actually, you're making a higher salary, but you can adjust those steps. So that is, again, something that can be discussed per the compensation philosophy of the organization. I just got a couple more here. Again, for these recommendations, so that implementation date, that's something that you all, can direct of when do we want this to go forward and when is the approach essentially going to come into place. We do recommend, though, to make sure that you all are looking at compensation on an ongoing basis. I understand from the history that is something that y'all have done, but it's always something we like to reiterate. Again, I don't know the history of the turnover of this board, so I'm not sure what experience y'all have with that. But just making sure that y'all do keep in mind, compensation is something that changes. I mean, you saw that chart, dipped up real high, dipped down low. You see the movement of the market. So again, making sure you keep a regular pulse on that is important. Conducting a comprehensive study every 3 to 5 years, and then making sure you're reviewing grades as needed. So there's sort of the high level overview. Happy to address any questions or get anything. Yeah.
The board. I have a question. What extent did you look at retention? An adjacent district, but it's being substantially more. We need really good talent to them. The opposite of that, are there certain positions for multiple applying for? Therefore, they're enough to attract them.
Yeah. So retention can factor in a couple of different ways. Actually, with your system, one of the ways that retention typically would factor in is when we make sure we compare specific benchmark classifications to the market. We always try to look at high turnover positions there. Well, in your study, we actually were able to look at all positions. So again, in that way, it didn't actually control anything in that way because we were able to look at all positions. But what I would indicate is with your compensation philosophy, kind of exactly what you mentioned, you may decide, hey, if we look at the average for all positions and you're still seeing turnover in a certain area, it may be because of a specific competitive organization that maybe just outstrips you. Again, we saw, I think East Bay was the #1 peer. So again, having another organization, significantly higher up in the market, it can be a reason for you to essentially offer a more aggressive approach for certain classifications. Again, we typically do recommend that is based on data. So that is something we can work with your organization on, is setting a policy for that. We've done that all across the country, to basically say if you hit certain thresholds of turnover, that would trigger a review to basically say, do we adjust the philosophy? Do we add a supplement or a stipend, or basically change the pay grade? But it definitely factors in. You're right about that. And so we would recommend that for your compensation philosophy to keep that in mind.
The other question I would have would be relative to COLA. I thought it was like 130% or something like that for Calaveras.
Yeah. So the way that works, the cost of living data that we pull, it is sourced through a separate company, and that organization, they do cost of living. That's their line of business. We subscribe to that data. What they do is they actually go across the country. They survey themselves. They pull data. They use federal data as well. And they basically assemble a basket of goods to understand how expensive is it to live in a certain area of the country. It's done at the county level. So Calaveras County would have its own figure. And they actually pull things. It goes into things like housing. So it actually looks at both renting and owning a home. It looks at transportation costs, gas, fuel, groceries, insurance, healthcare. And basically, I think there's 88 different things that they look at. They put those in a basket and they basically say, how expensive is it to live here versus there? 133 is the national average. Right. So that shows that it's 33% more expensive than the national average. That's kind of why I indicate it as, when I say relatively cheaper cost of living, I know that's sort of said with a grain of salt here. But again, if you're at 133 and someone's also at 150, it's just even that much more expensive there. Someone's at 125. Doesn't mean it's cheap there, but it just means it's a little less expensive than here.
Or to be looking at this, we really need that number relative comparators rather.
Correct. Yeah. So, and the recommendations, that we gave actually used those figures to adjust everybody relative to you. So if somebody's 1% more expensive than you, we can drop their salary by 1%. If they're 1% less expensive, we can adjust their salary 1% up. And so that is something that we did factor in. That is something our data does show and does have. So again, that is certainly something that we'll have access to.
Thank you.
So we'll move on. This is an informational item. So Michael, unless you've got something you want to add, I would open up public comment.
Nothing to add.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll do public comment. You'll have 3 minutes. I'm going to be timing it on my phone. So when you get to 3, I'm not going to cut you off, but I will put up my phone and we can work together. You guys want to queue up, it's going to move things quicker, but I really do appreciate everybody being here. I'm looking at it. And kids, nephew, happy people in this room. Good to see everybody today. So who wants to lead off? Public comment. Purple. Sarah's not here.
Anybody here?
Renee? Francisco? You have
Yes.
3 minutes.
I was gonna mention that whenever you guys speak from the mics up there, they break up. I'm only getting partial commentary when you guys are speaking, so I don't know what's going on. But anyway, somebody needs to look at that because it breaks up and we really can't understand, or I couldn't understand what some of the sentences were. But I have previous experience running compensation studies, et cetera. And my question has to do with recruitment. What level of recruitment do we think we are missing out on because of the compensation we put on the table? You've addressed retention, and that would be the other end of the pipe. What kind of folks are leaving because they're getting better pay? Are we really experiencing a recruitment challenge? Because as I understand the market in wastewater and water treatment, they're experiencing a huge flow of retirements across the state, which makes the source pool a little bit more difficult to attract. And I'm wondering how you're going to look at the politics of the situation, where a lot of the people that are concerned about their rates first point to the significantly higher levels of compensation that they see at the district versus anywhere else in the county.
Thank you very much, Francisco. Other comments online? All right. I know it's difficult. It's never fun to get up and do public speaking. I still get nervous getting up and doing this. But if anybody would like to get up and tell us what they think, be happy to.
You have to stay for the whole meeting anyway now.
All right. Come on, come on up. Yes, sir.
I would think you hear you online.
Yeah.
The report that was this on?
Yep.
That was given to the board members. When will that be available to the employees?
It should be posted online,
We shared that already. Oh, it's already up? Yep.
but it's on the website for this meeting.
It was in the agenda packet for this meeting.
I apologize.
It's okay. The entire world gets it now.
No question.
All right. Very good. Anything else from the board? Nothing from the
Yeah,
public?
I have one thing.
Jeffrey?
I'm in District 3. We had this huge snowstorm. I want to thank the operations team and the people that support the operations team for the great work you've done since that snow. I've been listening, on next door, listening to comments and things, and I think we ended up, given the severity of the storm, looking pretty good. So thank you.
I don't know. We're going to clap out loud. Freeze their butt up in the snow. But yeah, I agree. Echo your comments. I think on behalf of the board, I want to thank everybody who just did some heroic work the last couple of weeks. And God, no one got hurt. You guys got everything done. So thank you very much. Michael, is there anything else on this item?
That's it.
Yeah, we'll take let's take a 5-minute break and we'll come back in.
Thank you all for.
Welcome back to the CCWD board meeting. We are on item 5A, audited financial statements. Michael.
This one I'm going to turn over even more quickly because I think than the last time, because I don't need to give as much of an introduction to an audit as I do a comp study, because we do those every year. And so I think, Kip, are you online and ready to go?
I sure am. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
All right, great. So I'm ready to go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for having me. Again, yes, my name's Kip Hudson. I was the audit partner on the audit. This was the first time we were completing your audit this year. So, enjoyed learning all about you guys this year, and it was a pleasure for the most part. But we'll go into all the things that went into it. And so I'll first go through the required language I have to give you guys as governance, and then I'll do a brief overview of the main financial statements, and then just let you know if anything changed from the prior year. So that being said, I'll jump in. And first thing I can say is that the version you guys have in your packet here has the watermark for the draft on it. That was purely because we needed to get a certain letters back before we could technically issue the final. Subsequently, we have received those letters, so the final version will be the exact same as this one. So in case there's a question about that. So we did issue, or we will issue our audit report with the date of February 26, 2026, with an unmodified opinion. So that's a clean opinion on the financial statements. We believe the most sensitive estimates affecting the financial statements are the lives of depreciable assets, the allowance for doubtful accounts, the fair value of investments, and the discount rates used for the public-public partnership receivable, leases receivable, and lease liabilities. We evaluate all the key factors and assumptions used to develop these sensitive estimates and determine that they are reasonable in relation to the financial statements taken as a whole. Again, this is just required language for you guys, so just bear with me here. We do believe the financial statement disclosures are neutral, consistent, and clear. The most significant difficulty encountered in performing the audit was the availability and the turnover of the head finance personnel this year. Some was just pure timing and that Jeff needed to retire at a certain point for it to make sense with how, government pensions work. Then we started up the audit pretty close to when Kylie was taking her leave. So overall, there was some bad timing on when this audit had to be completed. And then with Michael Baer leaving unexpectedly, we were kind of just put in a place where we're like, all right, how are we going to get this audit finished? So, but obviously we're here today. Everybody worked really hard to get these financial statements, in a point we can get them issued. And then we got the SEO report completed and issued within a reasonable period of time. And there's a lot that goes into the audit on both sides. And so, kudos to everybody involved to get us here. We did, management did correct all misstatements noted during the audit. There were no misstatements noted that we considered to be material to the financial statements. There were some that we believe were material enough that we should record them, including a prior period adjustment of $431,000 that you'll see kind of throughout the financial statements to accrue for some expenses occurred in June for the year into June 30, 2024. In the water and sewer funds, but were not recorded during that period. So we went ahead and recorded that this year. We had no major disagreements with management, and then we obtained management representations also dated February 26, 2026. As far as audit findings and issues, we had no findings, as you can see in the financial statements. We also didn't issue a management letter. However, due to the difficulties noted earlier, a lot of our time was used just to ensure that the required audit procedures were being done and completed, and that we could support the balances in the financial statements and make the required adjustments. And so we weren't left with as much time as desired to really dig into, all the policies, procedures, and internal controls as much as we thought we would at the beginning of the audit, or as desired. But that being said, we did full control testing over, your main, transaction cycles, which is your cash receipts, cash disbursements, and payroll. And we had no deviations noted in any of our testing. So in those areas, which are your main areas, everything looked good as far as our testing is concerned. So that was really good to see. And we hope to, review controls again in the subsequent audit and, really dig into some other areas that we didn't have really the time to be able to allocate to that this year. There was also no single audit that was required this year, so you didn't have federal expenditures that exceeded the amount that required a single audit. So there was a lot less compliance testing and potential for compliance findings as a result of the single audit. I believe that you guys will be subject to one for your 2026 year end, but that will yet to be determined, I suppose. We did apply certain limited procedures to the management's discussion and analysis section and your supplementary schedules on your net pension liability and OPEB, which are required supplementary information. However, we didn't audit, and we give no opinion on those sections of the financial statements. And then lastly, we also have another report in there, our report on internal controls and compliance. And that states that there were no material weaknesses or non-compliance issues noted. So that was all the required language I have to give you guys. So now we'll go to the main financial statements. So it's going to be past the MD&A section. I'll start on page 15. I believe that's page 109 in the agenda packet, if that helps. So here we'll start with the statement of net position. You can see that it's broken down by your various funds, your water, sewer, and your new hydro fund, which was new to 2025. And then it also gives a comparative information for the 2024 year end. And you can see a lot of it's going to say restate on 2024. That's that $431,000 adjustment we made. So total assets, you can see ended at about $225.7 million. That included about $32.5 million in current assets and about $193.2 million in non-current assets. This was an increase about $4.5 million from the prior year, mainly from an increase in your capital assets net of the accumulated depreciation of about $10.9 million. And that was mainly due to a significant amount of work being done on your various construction in progress projects. And some of those projects actually were completed and moved into operation during the year, but there was still a lot going into all those CIP projects. The increase was offset by various items, including cash and cash equivalents, decreasing about $4.4 million. And you'll see that on the statement of cash flows coming up. And there was a decrease in your grants receivable, about $1.6 million, due to just a decrease in available grant funding around year end. And then you can also see, again, that new hydro fund. That would be a big change for your financial statements this year. And so it was basically created to break out the hydro, balances and activity from the water and sewer funds, and which that's where it was reported in previous years. So it's not new. It's just moved out of those funds and now being shown as its own fund. And this will just help show and track the activity in the hydro fund to the users of the financial statements. And towards the bottom there, you see your deferred outflows of resources. That ended about $7.4 million, a decrease about $3.1 million. And that was just a decrease in your deferred outflows from your pension plan and your OPEB plan. And those are calculated by the actuarial reports. On the next page here, you can see it starts with your liabilities. That ended about $61.7 million. That included about $8.6 million in your current liabilities and about $53.1 million in non-current. Overall, it's a decrease about $4.9 million from the prior year, mainly due to your pay downs of your long-term liabilities. That was about $1.9 million. And then the other stuff, just accounts payable, accrued expenses are down about $1.3 million. And then your net OPEB liability also decreased about $1 million. The next section, you have your deferred inflows of resources, total about $9.7 million. That was a decrease about $1.1 million from the prior year. And then that was mainly the biggest chunk was just your annual receipt of your PPP receivable. And that left you with your net position down towards the bottom, about $161.6 million. And you can see that's made up of mainly your net investment in capital assets, a total of about 126.8 million. And then the remainder is your restricted net position, about 28.9 million, and your unrestricted of about 6 million there. And then, so that's good on the balance sheet there. And so we'll go to the statement of revenues, expenses, and change in net position. That's the following one on page 17. And overall, you can see your change in net position kind of towards the bottom was about 7.4 million. So that was your net income for the year. If you go back up to the top, your operating revenues were about 26.2 million, an increase about 5.8 million from the prior year. And that was mainly in your water sales and sewer charges were up about 4.8 million from the new rates going into effect. And then also you can see that new hydro fund, the PPP revenue and power sales are considered operating for the hydro fund. So that's new to that section there. And then on the next section, you can see you have your operating expenses totaling about 29.2 million. That was a slight increase, about 1.2 million from the prior year. And that was mainly your salaries and benefits increased about 2.4 million, as well as your other operating expenses increasing. And then that was all kind of offset by the decrease in your pension benefits of, a pretty significant amount. In your non-operating revenues, that was about 7.5 million, very consistent from the prior year, only the decrease about 148,000. You can see the main things in there, that PPP revenue, power sales now being of an operating. But then the other main change there was your arbitrage expense that decreased down to just 19,000. And that was due to the change in the underlying assets or investments that created the arbitrage expense in previous years. So it was expected that that would kind of drop off this year. And then that last section there, you can see your capital contributions and transfers. That was a decrease about 3.8 million due to the decrease. And you can see right there the capital R&R fees and the capital contributions. So less capital contributions this year. So that left you with your change in net position about 7.4 million. And again, you see that prior period adjustment on the bottom there, about 431,000. And on the final main statement here, you have your statement of cash flows. So this is just gonna be a different way of looking at the activity. So the ins and outs of cash. You could see your cash decreased about 4.4 million. That's kind of towards the middle bottom area there. And it was made up by these main sections here. You see you have your cash flows from your operating activities. That was an increase in cash, about 1.8 million. In the next section, you have your cash flows from your non-capital financing activities. That was an increase in your cash, about 7.3 million. You can see that made up about, your property taxes and assessments, and then your operating grants and some other income there. And then your cash flows from your capital and related financing activities. That was a use of cash, about 16 million. And you can see the bulk of that is the purchase of capital assets, and then the principal and interest paid on your long-term debt liabilities. And then lastly, you have your cash flows from your investing activities, and that was an increase in cash, about 2.5 million, which left you with your cash and cash equivalents at the end of the year of about 53.9 million. And then on the next one, just a different way of looking at your cash flows from operating. I don't think I need to go into this here. And then your two following statements are just your assessment district custodial funds. Nothing I think I need to address on those ones. And then going through the next many pages here, you got your footnotes. These are just going to give you extra detail and support the balances we just talked about. There isn't any new footnotes that necessarily need to be added to your financial statements this year. We did implement one new governmental accounting standards board update, and that was statement number 101 on compensated absences. And then so that increased your compensated absences pretty minimally, about 84,000. And that's detailed out in note 19 as a change in accounting principle this year. The only other kind of new footnote would be the subsequent events footnote, note 20 on page 54. And that was due to the district entering into a 20-year installment purchase contract, about 16.6 million. So we considered that, big enough to have to disclose in the subsequent events. And then so nothing else in the footnotes I think that I need to bring up specifically, but if anybody sees anything in the footnotes that we want to talk about, I'd be glad to try and answer. After the footnotes, you have your required supplementary information, some other supplementary information, but nothing too significant I think we need to talk about. And then finally, our report on internal controls.
Thank you.
That all being said, I think that's it. So I'm here to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Questions from the board? Who'd like to go first? Russ, you get it. Get first back.
Kip, my name is Russ Thomas. It's the first time I've had a chance to see you and listen to you, but I was struck by a comment early in this thing talks about professional skepticism. That sort of sums up the attitude of this board of directors. We're very skeptical about a lot of stuff, but hopefully we're doing it professionally.
All right, great.
Thank you for your report. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, through several audits, my history, sometimes you'll get like a process recommendation some way. So we've got a new financial services director, got a board that has this fiduciary responsibility to our customers. Is there any kind of advice or recommendation you would give to either or all of us on things we should look for, a little concerned about, or delve into more deeply?
Yeah, I mean, I would, like I kind of noted, I wish I got to spend more time in, into all these areas, but there wasn't a whole lot of time this year to really get into the details. We looked at the items from last year that were provided, and again, we tested all the internal controls, which is more of on the, the actual accounting processes to make sure there's no issues there. I would love to, have the opportunity to do a little more on the next audit and go through more of the processes overall for the district so they can give more recommendations. But this year was a lot of learning about the district and then just finding the right person to be able to provide us the support to get these financial statements in a spot we could to be able to issue them. But there wasn't anything specific this year as far as recommendations. But again, I think there could be rooms for improvement, and we were hoping to have the time and ability to be able to dig into things a little more this next audit.
I don't know if this is an odd question or not, but in our previous financial services director, I talked about following good accounting principles. We need shifting some of our assets and cash into reserves. I didn't see anything in the report relative to that. Does that ring a bell? Do you have any thoughts on that? It doesn't change any of the balances where some of the money goes, and for some reason he felt that was necessary.
What was the specific thing he had noted?
Having some of the cash and assets shifted into reserve accounts.
Yes, I think we might have touched on it early on the audit. Again, that would be, I guess, just a recommendation. It wouldn't have been, anything internal control wise, which is what we were more concerned about that this year. But yes, I think that would be something that obviously is beneficial, and but again, we didn't really delve into that too much this year.
Go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that this is a proper time to ask for an opinion on this, but on page 24, at the very top of the page that talks about the district allocates general and administrative expenses 73% to the water fund and 27% to the sewer fund. And that's based upon the relative numbers of the water customers versus the sewer customers. I'm just wondering whether if you take the percentage of revenue for the water funds, that represents 65.5% of the revenue of those two funds, and the sewer is 34.5. And is there any, is it worthwhile to think about reallocating those expenses? It seems to me that sort of arbitrary just to have it be based on the population of those two respective accounts, rather than the financial impact of those two respective accounts.
Was that a question for the board or for me? Just want to know.
Well, I thought I stumped you, but it was
Maybe for both of us.
mostly it's just, I mean, for ever since I've been on the board, I've seen those percentage numbers reported, but up until now it never made it never I never questioned it until, I mean, it's,
So you want to know what the basis?
I know what the basis is, but I question the appropriateness of, because if you could have the water revenue could be 10% and sewer revenue could be 90% if we were charging enough for sewer. See my point? It's not proportional. It's not proportional mathematically or financially. It's just only the population of those two accounts. I don't know what that does to future internal accounting methodology.
So we have looked at that before, the right way to split, and we've always come back to this, the division between the accounts is the most accurate way to create that division. There are certainly other ways to do it, but this is what has always made the most sense for us, just both in terms of a clear and accurate way to do it, but also just in sources of time spent activities. So I do think it makes the most sense to split it this way, but visit that there are other ways to do it.
Just throwing it out there.
That's a good question.
If I have a couple quick questions, this is Jack Harriman. I'm president of the board. One of them is following up on Director Robinson's question on controls and the questions you put in there. In your letters, you say several times that you are not giving an opinion on controls. But on the last sentence under reporting compliance matters, you do disclose that there are no other matters that are required to be reported under the general government accounting audit standards. And my question is, if somebody said, well, how many cows do you have? And I would tell them, on this ranch, I have this many cows, which tells them exactly what I'm looking at that time. It doesn't tell them how many cows I have. So my question to you is, what are you not required to serve that you didn't include in this? And before you answer, if we need to go to closed session for this, let me know.
Sorry, it was a little bit of a breakup as well.
The question is, you reported what you're required to. The fact that you use the required word makes me think perhaps there were things you wanted to report that were not required. So what are those things? Since, I'm asking you for your opinion, which you said you weren't going to provide, but I'm asking.
Yeah, no, I don't think it needs to go to closed session. There isn't really anything to that sentence other than maybe just coverage for our language here, but there isn't anything really specific that we wouldn't need to report on. If it was significant, we would report on it. It's just talking about minor things that maybe insignificant or immaterial to the financial statements that we note. But anything fraud related, anything like that is required to be, reported to you guys as governance. So there isn't anything being hidden within that language that I think that if you're getting at that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that the audit is one of the best ways to learn an organization. And there's nothing like the notes to tell you what's going on. And one of those weird people who thinks audits are kind of cool to read through. But I wanted to make sure, so let me ask you directly. You mentioned it during your presentation, but I want to make sure, in your opinion, are our controls adequate?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I do believe so. Like I mentioned, we went over your three main transaction cycles, basically your cash disbursements, cash going out, your cash coming in, and your payroll, which are all your three main things. And we did a full test to ensure that we could assess internal control risk at low. And so then the results of the testing showed no deviation. So I mean, if you're worried about any of the three areas in the district, those would be the three main things that you'd want to look at. And so I do believe in this, at least this very first audit with what we could do, that internal controls overall look pretty good.
Okay.
Of course, there could be recommendations that aren't necessarily internal control type items, just recommendations on better ways to run the district. But yeah, from an internal control perspective, I think things look pretty good.
Okay. Thank you. Second question, this is my last question. On our balance sheet, we don't carry the North Fork project as an asset, not on our books. I'm assuming after 50 years, there's a very good reason that exists. Can you tell me why that exists?
I am not familiar with the North Fork project, unless I'm just not thinking of it in the way we had talked about it before. If somebody can elaborate on that, maybe it'll trigger something for me.
Yeah, so we account for hydropower revenue, but not those assets in our financial statements.
Oh,
and
yeah,
so,
okay.
yeah.
Gotcha.
Is there,
Yeah, it's one of the two hydropower projects.
and why don't we own the asset? Why is it not on our books?
So there's a couple of different reasons, and I've been following up on this question myself because I noticed that when I first got to the district too. But I think
$1 billion. So.
yeah, we'll look into it. We'll revisit that more just to make sure it's properly characterized. But I think my recollection has had a lot to do with insurance. It's not in our property schedule. We're not responsible for insuring those assets because that's part of our agreement with NCPA. So while we have clear documentation of ownership of those assets, we're not treating them like assets as far as our financials.
We're just thinking because we have acquired a lot of debt. We wanted to offset assets.
And that
revenues.
is another reason, though, is some of that, the NCPA has also borrowed against that project. And so we haven't borrowed against it.
They've been depreciating an asset. Not that they've got a 50-year, would be capital. That would make sense.
Similar. Yeah. But we'll revisit that. I think it's a really good question to come back to and make sure we're characterizing.
It's just an enormous project.
It is a huge asset, right?
Not sitting on the books, jumped out.
Right.
All right.
Are we still switching auditors out every few years? The current policy that we keep them for what? Years or?
There's laws that speak to that we have to comply.
Where are these guys in that loop?
This is the first year we've worked.
Okay.
All right, so we have there are no further questions. This is a presentation. They're not accepting this. I read that correctly? No action on this item? So is there any,
Accept it?
I don't think there's a required action. We could accept it anyway.
Motion
Right?
to receive it.
Yeah, is there any public comment on this item? Any public comment online?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
Francisco.
Yes, sir. I'm wondering, I asked Michael this at the meet and greet, when are we going to see our first hydro audit would be one question. And you asked earlier about how administrative expense is shared 73/27. Is there a possibility to include the hydro project in that sharing down the line? And lastly, did this audit look at anything having to do with over collecting compared to the cost of service study done in 2023, given how well we've done in some of these reserve accounts.
Thank you. Other public comment online? Or other comment in the room? Michael, would you like to have rebuttal to anything?
No, I think I can follow up with Francisco on those questions.
Will you? Thank you. Very well, then let's make a motion to accept this.
File the audited financial statement.
For a second?
Second.
Move in a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 4-0-1. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Michael?
Thank you all.
All right. Item 6A, External Affairs. Kelly.
Good afternoon. Wait a second for Rebecca to pull up a little presentation. Okay, my external affairs report for March 4th, 2026. Some of the stuff you're going to see in here is kind of hot off the press. I just had 2 meetings earlier today, kind of in relation to this. So I'm going to, at the last minute, I try to incorporate some of that into it. I'm going to start with the customer portal and some of the metrics of how it's been doing. Right off the bat, our auto pay, that's what we totally have now. As far as enrollments, we have 4,131. The last month alone, we've had 9. And just this year, we've had 51. So you can see it's not really, since April of last year, it hasn't grown a ton, but it is gradual, and it is increasing in how fast people are signing up for that auto pay feature. You can see in April, we started at 3,899. As of this morning, we had 4,131. Just about daily, we're getting 1 or 2 that are signing up for the auto pay portion of the portal. You can see here, this is how many customer portal payments are through that portal, not just on auto pay, but someone who just logs in and makes a payment. In my report to the finance committee not too long ago, I mentioned that January was kind of the most we've had with 3,385, but that's how many payments through each month that come through the portal. Just this year to date, we've had 489 consumption threshold alerts sent, basically, and those thresholds are all defined by the customer. I'll explain it here in a little bit. I'll show you some screenshots of how to do that. We talked about that in the meet and greet, and so I've got some slides on that as well. But these are when the customer goes into their account and sets up their leak alerts, whether it be a daily consumption threshold, a monthly consumption threshold, or it'll also pick up those smaller, it's called an abnormal normal consumption, and that's basically a continuous use for over 24 hours. So we've had 489 of those sent out to the customers with however they want to receive it, whether it's text or phone. So it's all defined by the customer in their own account. 905 leak alerts. And again, those are also defined by the customer with those high amounts, whether it be on a daily or a bi-monthly amount. And again, this is all just this year, 2026. And not as common, but some folks do use our vacation threshold. We've had 145 of those sent. So that is where you can go in there and define if you're going to go on vacation for a certain amount of time. If you know you're going to be on vacation, in 2 weeks for a certain amount of time, you can go in there and set the threshold for that time frame. And so some people are using that. Some of those 145 alerts that have been sent out or might be redundant. They might be the same person a few times. It's because they're utilizing that tool. The notifications through Tyler, it's really been very, very useful. Tyler integrates seamlessly with Esri. So that little image on the right is basically I can go in there and set a polygon and say search within this box. It gives me a list on the left of all the active accounts in that polygon. And then I can cross-reference that usually with whatever the field staff gives me, whether it be a leak on a certain street. The field staff is really good about giving me all the different address that it affects, and then I can just pretty much go in there and click, and then the system automatically will notify all the active accounts within that polygon with whatever whatever phone number we have on file. So if they use it does send out a text and a phone call. So if they give us their landline, that'll fail through the text, but they'll get hopefully a phone call or leave a voicemail. Like for my account personally, I have my cell phone, so I will get a text message and a phone call. And if I don't answer it, then it just leaves a voicemail with whatever it is. And we've been using it a lot for the A to B project. Right now, all the main line is in, and we're starting to do these shutdowns. We did 5 different shutdowns for PRVs where we had outages, and now they're doing the service lines. We actually had one today. So what we're doing is we're sending out those notifications a week prior to the shutdown, and then I provide the field staff with a list of who we notified. And for these particular shutdowns, they're also door tagging each customer just to make sure we notify them. But we do have that ability to use some GIS tools to find the accounts. It's been very, very useful. We also used it throughout the last storm event with some notifications and also leaks. Here's a screenshot of the text. Every time I send one out, this is, I always test it on my own account just to make sure it goes through before I fire it off to all the customers. And so here's what you'd get. And this is actually a text that went out last week for today's shutdown, just basically saying it's from Calaveras County Water District, talking about the project, and then, the outage duration and the time. This was
Notice of scheduled water service interruption. Construction crews will be performing water line work as part of the A-B project on Thursday, March 5th, 2026. From 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. during this time, the water service will be temporarily shut off to allow for necessary infrastructure improvements. We apologize for any inconvenience this may cause and appreciate your patience. If you have questions or need additional information, please contact customer service at 209-754-3543.
Useful. I can't really control the voice. That is through Tyler. That's the robotic voice. I've, talk about it here in a minute too. I was without power during that storm for over a week, and I was getting those constantly from PG&E. So I think we're right in line. I don't think PG&E's voice was any better than ours. They're very similar. So that's that AI. Here's our website that we're using too for some of those notifications. During all that, just last week or the week before, we had a decent sized leak up in West Point. So we also utilize the website for that, and I can change the color of that bar on the top. So that's what you'd see. If you go to our website, you're going to see that notification right away. And if I have more details, I can also link it to another page where they can go and find out more details on it. So super useful tools. Here's a snapshot. Facebook still seems to be one of our most beneficial and most widely viewed platforms. This is usually how we're getting a lot of information out, and it's still growing quite rapidly. One thing that I always note in the lower right-hand corner there, not only do you have followers, up 550% over the last 28 days, but the non-followers are still very engaged with the platform too. Just in the last 28 days, 20,672 non-followers, up 318%, have viewed our social media platform. So still a very, very useful tool for getting information out. The FHOC meeting that I was talking about earlier, it's the Ebbets Pass Property Owners Council. It's a monthly meeting. Today was really focused on the storm event. I didn't get a chance to give CCWD's report. We usually always give a report. However, most of the meeting was taken up with county and that response, and then also some of the fire response to it. But I was really hoping to be able to give our account, or our report, because I think it's really profound. I live up in the area, and it's probably some of the more damage that I've seen probably ever. I mean, right now, if you drive around the Ebbets Pass area, it's remarkable. Every single property has trees down. I had 6 trees down just on my property alone. And, I'm really proud of the work that our staff does. We had very, very few water interruptions, and that's because of that hard work. I mean, there's people that were stuck in their homes without food, running out of gas, running out of heat, and when I think about the fact that they still had water, I think that's something we should all be proud of. But, a lot of folks really struggle with this storm up in that area, stretching Forest Meadows all the way up to Big Trees. Arnold seemed to have gotten hit the worst with just the weight of the snow was quite crazy. So I'm going to try to tie in just a little snapshot of what it looked like up there and then tie it back to water meters, because during this storm, our customer service staff were getting quite a few phone calls about preemptive, please go turn our water off. Where is our water? A tree fell on it. We don't know if it's our leak, your leak. You're utilizing centric tools to try to identify that, because we really had to be, we we had to put our resources out in the field, in appropriate places. And just going up to big trees to turn someone's water off because they're worried about a break wasn't really something we could do at that point. And several times during the storm, the highway was closed above Arnold. We couldn't even get up there to shut it if we wanted to. So. Yeah, here is just driving around. Always so splotchy. Looks good when I make it, and then I play here and it gets all splotchy. But yeah, just trees down everywhere. I mean, huge oak trees, a lot of cedars, mostly cedars. Power lines. I mean, everywhere you drove, this was what you saw. And I have a friend who does property management and who was actually going through and just checking properties for folks. And some of the photos that she had sent me makes these look like nothing. These are just some of the ones I grabbed really quick. But it was really, really crazy up there. This was just to get out. I mean, this was my house. I had 2 trees just to get out. On this particular day, I could not get out because I had a huge tree on the other side.
I was going to say, this is not during work hours. This is Kelly's personal time.
Well, that's not another tree on the house. This is common up there, what you see everywhere. This is what people woke up to in the middle of the night.
So this tree just fell, finished ripping out our power lines, fell on the propane tank. Over there, we got my beautiful daughter, who's just savage in the snow, getting ready to shut off the water line. Honestly.
So that tree fell on our water line, and we had 2 others leaning towards it. And I'll show you here in a bit. I mean, this is what people were worried about. We had several trees rip out water lines, some on our side, mostly on the customer side. And again, at that time, the customer's not really sure. So during that time, I couldn't get out. I had no power, no cell service, but I have in my personal truck, I have one of those cell boosters. You guys have seen them on trucks driving around, those little things. I was able to get a hotspot and still put out some of these notifications, what we were going through. For instance, we had an issue in Lakemont where we could tell that we were getting low flows and low pressures, but we didn't quite know where the leak was. Luckily, I think somebody from search and rescue, the wee hours of the night, found where the leak was. Crews were able to isolate it, but we were still able to get communication out, mostly through cell service at that time. Again, I still don't have internet back at my house as of today.
Kelly, I have a question. Actually, it's more for Michael and everyone. When we have a major storm like this and we have a number of people as a result of the storm that have leaks, are we able to offer any kind of compensations if they picked up a big water bill other than the one time where they
Not outside of the current.
and
We haven't heard any
said there's
requests.
numerous. This happened in numerous cases where the leaks are on the customer side, correct?
Yeah, and like a lot of times, I mean, everyone banded together up there. A lot of folks had their water turned off by their neighbor. And again, that bill hasn't come through yet, so some folks might not even really see what the leak adjustment would have to be.
We did just amend the leak adjustment policy to create a little bit more flexibility there. So if that,
I guess if there could be brought to the board
if that's
based
if
on
that
the
isn't
leak adjustment
adequate, yeah, we can bring it back.
policy. Okay.
I wanted to ask about this search and rescue. Were they out looking for somebody and found it, or what was their involvement?
There was so many different extractions during this storm, more than usual.
Hmm.
I don't have the exact numbers, but I know on one of the reports, Chief Johnson from the Ebbs Pass Fire said just in one day they had 80 different extractions.
Over 100 one day.
Okay, so that was something new. I don't think we've really seen. There was a lot of short-term rentals. It was just right on the heels of the holiday weekend, so there was a lot of folks up there just really not prepared for this and stranded without all the resources. So there was a lot of that. The sheriff gave a wonderful presentation this morning, kind of walking us through, their perspective.
There were a whole lot of people that just went up to help. But Martin, our supervisor, driving up and put it out on next door. You need help, give me a call. Give me a ride down to town, food, whatever. It's kind of a cool community response.
It was. I mean, people, I have friends that have snowmobiles that, I mean, you couldn't get around these subdivisions. Again, you couldn't just drive somewhere to go cut the water off. You couldn't just drive somewhere to go fuel up your generator.
Get a truck.
You couldn't drive around. There was a lot of people walking to the grocery store with sleds and stuff like that. I mean, you took it for granted. You couldn't move. We were locked down in that community for quite a while. So I was talking about the meter box. So here's what I did with my meter box is before the storm, I dug it out and I put a tub over it and kind of buried it. And then we just kept up on it because even though I had that one tree fall on the water line, which those will break a lot of water lines, I had two other leaners that I was worried about. So I wanted to be able to get to my meter box quickly. So I mark it and I put one of those boxes upside down on it. Makes it a little bit easier to find. And we kind of recommend that. I've always recommended that to folks, even when I was out in the field. Know where your meter box is, know where to shut it off in this kind of situation. Because if you didn't have it marked like that, everything looks the same. And so then having that box, you can hear it when you start shoveling, and then when you have it, it's much more easily accessible. So that's what we did at my house.
Are you going to start issuing those tubs?
No, those you have to buy your own tub. But it works really, really well. As Francisco mentioned earlier, I appreciate the compliments. It was a really wonderful meet and greet. We had the meet and greet on Friday night down in Rancho Calaveras. We went all the way till 9 o'clock, and we could have kept on going. Actually, she only had the reservation for a certain amount of time, so we had to leave, but there was just a really, really good question and answer session. When we met with Roxanne, who put it on, she was really specific about the agenda. She really wanted us to talk about how to read your meter, bills, all that kind of stuff, but we really asked if we can expand on that a little bit and tell a little bit more about CCWD. And so we were able to kind of talk her into it. I'm not going to go into the whole presentation, but I want to have this presentation available to the public because a lot of folks asked for it. So I figure if I include it as part of my report and memorialize it, and now it's ready. So some of the stuff you guys have already seen, but I think it's crucial to always kind of talk about, the scope of CCWD and how far we are spread out. I love talking about the watersheds. I asked if anybody in the room had ever been to the Lube room or up by White Pines Lake, and talked about basically the top of their watershed down there starts in that meadow behind the Lube room, essentially, a little bit higher, but I always use that meadow as kind of an example, and nobody even knew what I was talking about. So it's always kind of fun to say, hey, here's where your water comes from. Of course, we wanted to mention all of the different infrastructure. I think it's impactful just for them to kind of get that idea of how much infrastructure we are in charge of as the water district here. And then I wanted to get more into, Rancho specifically. A lot of these are from the A to B town hall before we kicked off the project. One of the fun facts is that at the time, Rancho Calaveras was the largest subdivision in the country. I thought that was kind of a cool fun fact before Boise Cascade took over and started to develop it. And I just talked about that infrastructure that they have down there with 6 water tanks, 4 pump stations, and a treatment plant. Briefly talked about the biggest expansion of that system was in 1991 with the new treatment plant, the infiltration gallery. That just kind of blew people's mind. I wish I could show them the old intake compared to the new intake, really to see what that looks like. Of course, at that same time, it was a brand new A tank, a brand new B tank, a brand new 16-inch transmission line that went from the treatment plant to A tank, and then the pump station at A tank. But then that led nicely into the A to B project, which Damon took over at that point and did a really good job talking about the construction aspect of it. Touched on just the scope of it, exactly what it does, what the purpose is, and he did a great job of explaining that like he does. And then also we didn't really, these pictures I think kind of speak for themselves. And plus, once we show these pictures, everybody down there, I forget what one woman said, like, these are the rocks we grow. We grow rocks or something like that. So they all understood it. And when they saw these, the whole room, you just felt the whole energy of the room understand how rocky that ground is. And this was constant for those guys. And then we jumped into, the pressures. I think a lot of folks don't understand, You know, I think this ties in with what makes us different than some of these other agencies in the foothills or excuse me, down in the valley. You know, I don't think people understand the different pressure fluctuations we have and how do we control that pressure. So again, Damon was still explaining very well just those components. You know, this project has 5 new pressure reducing valves, and you know, just kind of giving that hydraulic grade line of what that is, what we're doing to push water from A to B, and then what that does for the pressure of the system and how crucial those PRVs are. You know, here's a picture of one of those PRVs explaining that, you know, that main line, one on the bottom is basically for fire flow, and then that 2-inch bypass is usually your day in and day out usage. You know, that bottom one usually doesn't come on unless you flow high velocity. You know, once you open a hydrant is usually when that lower one comes on. That's put in there for those higher flow situations. Just a real quick cutaway of what these are, you know, what it does. I believe I've shown this to you guys before. I love seeing how this works. These are just hydraulic marbles in my opinion, but this is what keeps our systems regulated. Same thing. Damon did a good job of going over all the different pressure zones. You know, sometimes people don't realize there's these separate different pressure zones throughout the systems, you know, and again, this is just a snapshot of just one of our systems and just how those PRVs control all those different zones. Here's the snapshot of all the fire hydrants. This layer on my GIS layer is just fire hydrants. There's no outline. There's no anything else. So you can see those are all of our service areas just with fire hydrants. And I think I like the way it looks. I think it's really, really neat to see that aspect of it. Again, I didn't outline any of our service area. That's just that layer giving it that look. So those are all the fire hydrants. And I think, you know, any chance we have to communicate the fire hydrants, you know, and the water system, I think is helpful too. A lot of people don't realize that. I mean, I've had people say to me they didn't realize that fire hydrants had treated water. That's how they got their water. So people just don't know that some of that stuff. Then we jumped into meters, kind of explained how to read your meter. I do have those tutorials on our website. These have been up there for a while. It's how to read each and every one of our meters, how to locate it, where it might be, and actually how to read it. Won't do the whole video, but it's going to show just one. Again, we have 3 different styles of meters during that project, so each one of them has a tutorial on our website. And then I did a bucket test tutorial as well, so if someone would like to see how to kind of check your meter, not calibrate it, but check its accuracy using a bucket, this walks you through the steps of how to do that. And then I offered up a QR code for anyone in the audience who wanted to scan it and know where that information is. You know, this was, again, really just community-driven event, and we really wanted, for folks that don't know where that information is or how to find it. And so thankfully, I saw at least a few phones up for a while, scanning it, learning where the information is. This is back to the portal, and this is snapshots of my portal. So basically, these are just screenshots of what happens when you open up the portal. Immediately on the top right there, you've got all your different billing functions. You can pay your bill, manage auto pay, or schedule a payment. I schedule my payment just a draft on the due date. That way I don't have to worry about it. Just whenever the due date is, it pulls out the amount there. Water consumption, again, this is your home page when you pull up the portal. Also, all your billing history, you can look back and click on every single bill you've had. So if you want to look back and bring up the PDF of previous bill, you have that option through the portal as well. And then here's the alert section. So that contact information, that's where you pick if you want to get a phone call, a text, or an email. I have all 3 selected, so I get all 3. I also set my leak alerts kind of on the low side. I'm always changing it just to make sure the system is working. And it works, for me, it has worked very, very well to the point where it's sometimes annoying because I have email, text, and phone. So within a minute, I get 3 things reminding me I have a leak or something, you know. So, but it's useful, and it all just happens automatically. And there on the bottom is those vacation alerts that I was telling you about. I haven't used those yet, but you just define the dates and then your threshold, however you'd like. And this, they wanted to talk about leaks, how you identify leaks. Again, I've reported to you guys before, so I'm not going to go too much in depth, but very useful in finding leaks. Here you can see at 3 a.m. This is mine when I had a leaky toilet, and you're using a constant amount throughout the night. So if you were to bring up your portal and see this, and this got caught for me by just saying that abnormal usage. It just said you've got an amount of water that's being used 24 hours a day, and it let me know. Leaky toilet, fix my leaky toilet finally, and it's all fixed. Actually, I don't know if you guys like working on leaky toilets, but it's a pain. And it got to the point where every time I fixed something, something else broke, and I had to do another valve, and I had to get a special tool. And at one point, I thought, man, the leak was cheaper than all this stuff I've got to buy. But it's fixed, and I have no more leak alerts at the moment. I wanted to really show at this meeting too, really easy to understand, our current water rates. This is just the current rate structure for this particular year. Our bi-monthly base rate for water, 172.17. What that would be for monthly would be 86.09, and that puts it at $2.87 per day for your water. And then there's all the different tiers. I've broken down the bill like this for you guys before. Same thing, about half of the audience were water and wastewater customers. About half were water only customers. So we wanted to have both costs broken down and kind of walk everyone through what the different functions are in our bill. A lot of folks don't understand the difference between gallons and cubic feet. So I talked about that with them. And then I wanted to talk about, your indoor usage. About 85% of your indoor usage ends up going down the drain or sewer if you're a sewer customer. And these are kind of industry standards where it just roughly says, shower and bathrooms, 28%, toilet, 28%, laundry, 20%, so on and so forth. Our current wastewater bill equates to $4.92 per day. And if you broke down each one of those uses, that would put, so I used 28% of $4.92 for your shower. It's about $1.38 a day, and so on and so forth. I think these are interesting perspectives when you just start thinking about costs and what we do on a daily basis. I think it's an interesting way to look at it and just think about it. This was obviously really driven by ratepayers. This meet and greet was all about ratepayers, so I wanted to also identify with them as a ratepayer myself. Been a ratepayer for decades, and here's my bill. Here's my recent bill. Can't really see it. I apologize, but I did zoom in a little. Here, my usage was 1,884 cubic feet. This was really the first time I bumped into tier 2. It was because of those leaks. Usually I can stay within that tier 1 most of the time. So this time I was in tier 2, and I like seeing what it looks like in a monthly. So I broke it down into monthly for my most current bill. And again, there's that base rate of 86.09. My bi-monthly consumption was $50.39, so $25 for consumption. Again, usually I don't use that much water. This particular time I did, which made my current bill, the one I haven't even paid yet, $111.28. Then I wanted to see, I haven't done this exercise in a while since the rate study. I wanted to compare it to some of the local agencies. So I compared to some of the local agencies and then also two from our neighboring counties. And this is what my monthly cost comparison would be as of today with all the other agencies. So I stuck with monthly because some bill monthly. So I just wanted to break it down that way. Most everyone bills in cubic feet except for CPUD bills per 1,000 gallons. TUD does bill in cubic feet. However, they have the first 400 cubic feet is baked into the rate. So, but then once you go over 400 cubic feet, now you're in their tier system. Actually, it's not a tier system. It's just their consumption, which is like 5 something per unit. So the other agencies don't have tiers where we have tiers, but this is, again, my cost there did bump me into tier 2. And this is what it would compare to from all the other agencies and their current rate structure as well in a monthly comparison. I wasn't sure. I haven't looked at all the other agencies' rates in quite a while, so I wasn't sure what the results would be. I thought it was very interesting what the results are. And then another meeting I had today, for Aqua Region 3, for the next 2 years, I will be the outreach captain again. I was that for the last 2 years. I thought it was pretty fantastic. And then also I signed up to be on the communication committee, and that first meeting will be coming up, and I think in a week or two. But today's kickoff meeting for the outreach captain was pretty cool. They're kind of changing the format of it, so really looking forward to that. It was kind of a busy day bumping between the EPOC meeting and that, so there was a lot going on there. But really proud to do that again for the next 2 years and looking forward to it. And that is it.
Kelly, questions from the board?
Russ? Kelly, I'm glad you showed that comparison to the local providers. But it struck me, looking at this analysis of the comparators for the labor. I'd like to see you get 11 or 12 like we looked at for the labor, and I just really despair when I read and hear comments that CCWD rates are the highest in the world or the state or in the nation. I mean, we need to. And how could somebody look at those 4 comparisons that you had and give any credibility to the statement that it's the highest in the state? I mean, it's weird.
Yeah,
it's nice to look at that context, but I mean, what I've learned too is it's the highest for them. It's the highest for our customers because that's usually the only bill they're getting. So they're feeling it, and so some folks don't really care what the comparison is. If it's hard for them, it's hard for them, and so it's kind of hard to put that up there. But I really think I really think this meet and greet was fantastic. I mean, it went really well. A lot of understanding, a lot of good conversation. Michael did a great job as well, and questions were coming, but they were all. It was really important. It was important to have that dialogue and have that Q&A session, and really just spend that time with them. And I hope we get to do a lot more of those because very beneficial.
Great report. Thank you.
Excellent report. Michael, anything else?
On Kelly's report?
Yep.
Nope.
Kelly, thank you very much. Oh, wait,
Thank
should we
you,
do
Kelly. Great
is there any public comment on this item? It's not an action item, but I'll ask you in the room, you online. Seeing none. Michael, you get the next item.
And I'll touch on a couple of the same things Kelly did, but I'm not going to try to repeat anything, just take a couple of things I wanted to highlight. The Arnold storm, and it was affected West Point too. Our guys up in West Point were really busy, but Arnold really bore the brunt of it. And so I just want to echo what Director Robertson said and what Kelly said. Our crews were phenomenal, and the supporting staff behind them too. But the level of work and dedication and perseverance that it took to do everything that we needed to do to keep almost everybody in water was really remarkable. And it was, we came up against the limitations of some of our tools, we realized. And so I want to give a shout out to NCPA because we were, after several days of running on generators for a lot of our facilities up there, really struggling to get access to those facilities so that we can refuel those generators. The sawmill tank, which we took a tour with incidentally like the week before, Director Garamendi and Director Robertson, or was it Director Davidson? Sorry, Director Robertson. So you guys saw firsthand just how hard it is to get to that tank, even on a sunny day. With that much snow, we have a side-by-side with tracks that can usually help us get access to our equipment, and it was ineffective in that depth of snow. NCPA has a snowcat, or actually a couple of snowcats that they use for access to Spicer and McKay's, and they responded right away and said, "Where do you need us? Be there." And they got out there early Friday morning, I think it was, of the week of that storm, and spent the day with our guys jockey and fuel up to Sawmill from White Pines Lake and refueling that generator. And so it was kind of an all hands on deck incident for us and for our local partners. Public Works also worked really well with them. They came to our assistance when we needed access to certain points, and they had to obviously prioritize if there was a medical evacuation that needed to happen, but they were really responsive to our requests for access to our infrastructure. The sheriff's office did a great job of coordination during the incident. So just really good coordination among the local agencies. It felt like to me, but really got a big assist from NCPA and keeping that really critical generator running. We did have some damage. We had a very scary incident with one of our mechanics, and the truck is probably totaled. Not his fault, but just a branch falling from a tree. Could have been a whole lot worse. So we're grateful that all of our crews were safe, and no injuries. But that truck's probably totaled. I think we're still waiting to find out for sure. A couple of generators that were damaged during the incident. So we're working with JPIA on and claims, as well as with the sheriff's office on damage estimates for FEMA. So it's just the storm after the storm is the financial accountability. But just can't say enough about how our guys responded, how our crews responded, and it's not just highly skilled labor that we have. It's perseverance, and work ethic, and dedication. Reminded of it, but it's really on display during that incident.
Michael, I think why don't you say about the story of the sawmill tank on the levels? Well, not much further. Water would have been out.
Oh, so it serves a lot more than 600 people. It serves, a big chunk of that service area. But we had two main breaks that in Lakemont Pines that we couldn't get crews into to even identify on that first night. And then we couldn't get into repair for a week and after main breaks occurred. So we were able to get in using metal detectors to locate the valves to isolate those 5 feet of snow. Just isolating the leaks was a big work effort. But yeah, there was a significant amount of water loss during those leaks, and isolated them as quickly as we could. And then we had about 20 homes, 19 homes, I think, that were out of service for about a week, which is really, it's the first time in my 7 years at CCWD where we couldn't fix a main break the day of, basically. I can't think of another time where we had to leave customers out of water for more than, less than a day. But there just was no way to access these breaks during that period of time. So we were in communication with those customers during that time and got them back into service as quickly as possible. In fact, sooner than I thought was going to be possible. Our guys got in there and did it even while there was still a lot of snow on the ground. Yeah, but we were always nervously watching Sawmill because of how critical it is to that whole district. Good question. Yeah. Well, I can tell you our guys want a snowcat now.
Cheaper to rent.
When we used to have one. I mean, kidding aside, I've had discussions with the county already about how, whether it's CCWD, we got rid of our snowcat and replaced it with that side by side with tracks, and what we know now, and Evan's past fire learned this as well. Those side by sides are not effective in this type of storm event. And so the discussion I've been having with county agencies is someone here needs a snowcat that can provide that type of access, that type of critical response, whether it's CCWD, and then we're going to get mutual aid requests from other agencies, or Public Works, Sheriff's Department's search and rescue. One of us local partners needs access to that kind of equipment, probably even two. And so there'll be a discussion about what the right way to address that is. But as I'm going on this a lot, one of the things I was meant to say is we're going to do a broader after action report, and Ops is going to come and give it'll probably be an agendized item in the next board meeting where we'll get into this in more detail. That type of question is one of the things. And then on the Valley Springs event, Kelly covered it really thoroughly, and I just will echo his appreciation for Roxanne and for anyone else that was involved in organizing it. Just a really fantastic event, and I know a lot of work went into it. And we know from experience it takes a lot of effort to pull off those kinds of event, and it was really successful. Good turnout, really good dialogue, and so we're just really grateful for that opportunity to be there. The engineering committee met yesterday. We decided to pull the CIP review off of that engineering committee agenda. Covered all the rest of our engineering committee work. We're going to bring the CIP back, so we'll have a second engineering committee meeting this month, March 18th, I believe it's scheduled for. We needed a little bit more time on our end for the capital improvement program update, and wanted to make sure we weren't overwhelming any one of those engineering committee agendas because it deserves a lot of attention. So we'll do that on the 18th. The plan is to still get that CIP update to the board on March 25th. But wanted to provide that update on engineering. Met with the Highway 4 agencies again this week. So the Utica agencies, Angels Camp, Utica, and Union Public Utilities District. We've made a lot of progress on a draft memorandum of understanding that we talked about a while back, but it's been a while and it's kind of shelved for a while. I think we're at a point now where we're ready to bring it back to our boards for collaborating on a regional water supply study for the Highway 4 corridor. We adopted, each of the agency boards adopted a resolution along those lines in, I think, 2 years now. And so we're excited to be making progress on that. There's been some other work that has happened during that time, but I think this is the biggest piece that'll come from it. So I would anticipate that being on the board agenda later this month as well. And then just a heads up, a lot of work going on. Andrew is working on our update for our urban water management plan. That is a update that occurs every 5 years, and every 5 years it's a different. It's not just updating the old one. DWR publishes guidelines for what they expect to see in the urban water management plans, and so it changes the report every time we do it. So that's something we'll be. We have to adopt it before the end of this fiscal year, and so we'll give the board a couple of opportunities to bring that for adoption. But just wanted to get that on people's radar. Other than that, a lot of really good hard work going on, staffed up, and yeah. Board.
Thank you very much. Any public comment? None. We'll move on to board reports. Information, future agenda items. Yes, will lead us off.
Nothing to report.
Yep. Nothing to report from my side. Next board meeting is going to be March 25th. March 11th meeting is canceled. We'll be adjourning into closed session. We'll return afterwards to close out this meeting. Thank you.
Any public comment on closed session?
Thank you very much. Before we turn off the computers, is there any public comment on closed session? Seeing none, we will move into closed session. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.